we got the legendary Kool Koor in the house, you know, who's been down with this culture movement for let's say, I think like three decades maybe now, 4 decades. Wow, you see. So we got people who is not only, you know, been harvesting from the fruits. We got people who was there making the compost and making the soil ready, so for everything after that being able to come, blossom and bloom, and also all the terror that it, you know, came down with at the same time, which we had to anticipate on in many ways. So coming from that ground soil, people want to know who you are by your own words. So would you give us a small introduction?
Okay, my name is Kool Koor. I'm from the South Bronx, born and raised, and entered into hip-hop culture via first graffiti or street art, or what we call writing back then, in 1976. And I was 12 years old. And from that day forward, I realized that there was something going on around me that was a lot bigger than me, and I wanted to be a part of that. And to be a part of that meant that I had to go through the initiation of passage, meaning you start as a toy. We call a toy as someone with no style, with no skill. Everybody was a toy.
Right.
Nobody entered the game with skills. You was a toy. So you had to learn how to make that letter, and you had to write it over and over again, trying to perfect it. Like a master calligrapher will, even a Zen master will try to do a Zen circle. His entire life is about trying to make that perfect circle, which you know you never make, but it's the mindset and the training, and that's what the tagging was about. It was about repeating your craft, perfecting your craft by repetition. A lot of people were in it for the glory. A lot of people were in it for the fame. Others were in it because they had no choice. Me, I was in it because I had no choice. When I looked out of my window as a youngster and I saw on the wall of the schoolyard this big piece that appeared on the wall in white with sky blue letters and stars, and there was a girl from my building named Gloria, and she was writing her name Gloria next to it, and Mama and stuff like that. And I was like, she's not an artist. I know that she didn't do it. So I opened my window. I lived on the 2nd floor, and I yelled at her. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna tell your mother." She was like, every profane word that you can imagine, she spit at me. So I said, okay, if she could do it, I could do it. So I grabbed a simple magic marker. I went in the hallway of my building, projects, and I started writing my name in the hallway. Went upstairs to my boy's house on the 8th floor, who was also an artist because we always used to draw together as kids. And I asked him if he wanted to go with me to write in the hallways. He first thought I was crazy, but then afterwards he joined me. And the first thing I wrote was not my given name. I wrote Rammellzee. So, you know, my name is Charles, but I said, all right, Rammellzee, so that nobody knows it's me. And my man A1, his real name was Anthony, but he wrote Grandmaster B.
And that was the dude that went with you at that moment?
Yeah.
All right.
So we was writing these other names. And at that moment, you look on the wall and you saw, or I saw, he saw, the walls covered with graffiti, covered with tags, different names. And, you know, at that time, imagine 12 years old, my world was leaving school, walking home, going to school, walking home. Graffiti was everywhere, but it was not on my radar because in my mind was go home, look at my Thunderbirds, my science fiction, and eat my sandwiches and do my homework. But after that day, I realized that there was something else going on. So I started to dig deeper into it and try to decipher what was written on those walls. And seeing that there were some things that had style, other things that didn't have style. I didn't have style yet. So I just kept going until I started to perfect something.
Right.
And then at that point, you go through the initiation of changing names,
right,
and finding other names that you can use to represent yourself. As a youngster, once again, I was not that type of cat that would say, yeah, I don't care, I'm just gonna write Charles because it's me, I don't care. So people, if they see it, they'll know who it is. So I was still going through my names. So I had Rammellzee, I had Eotra, I had Boast, I had Arc 2. But at one particular moment, because I like to play chess, there's a piece in the chess game called the rook.
Yeah.
And I like the rook.
The one in the corner.
Yeah, the strategic one, you know, hitting you with right angles. And I like that. It was also an architectural element. So I said, I like that as a graffiti name, but I said, I'm not going to write rook. That's too obvious. So I took the K and the R and I turned it around because I thought, you know, in life, sometimes you have to look at things from the other way around to understand it. So at that moment, I think I was about 15 at that point, and Koor became my graffiti name. And then I said, Koor is good, but I want to have a title in front of that. So then I wrote The Arbitrator Koor. So if you Google now, The Arbitrator Koor, if you look in the ancient, in the old books and stuff like that, you'll see my name in the context of The Arbitrator Koor. Because I felt that what I was doing artistically was arbitrating reality that we know it and another reality that we don't know. Because my early paintings were science fiction, space scenes with futuristic cities and explosions and wild style tags in it. That was my style. So I was known in the graffiti scene as that guy that was doing these robots. So I would do my wild style stuff and I'd have these futuristic robots in my paintings. And so I was the arbitrator. Years and years went on, and in 1980, I was invited to be in my first exhibition at 16 years of age in the South Bronx. And that was my first professional introduction into the art world. And after that, I just continued making art exhibitions. And that brought me into a situation where my first artwork was bought by a woman named Dolores Newman. And she bought a drawing of mine and she said, are you interested in me helping you to sell your artwork? I just sold my drawing for $500. I'm 16 years old. So I was like, yeah, this could work. I like this idea. Unbeknown to me, Dolores Newman was the wife of a guy named Hubert Newman. And his father was one of the biggest art collectors in America. And Dolores was the person who was advising her father-in-law what art is going to be the next hot art. So I was the first artist that she was representing in graffiti, and she started representing other artists, and she became the most important graffiti dealer in New York.
Isn't that the same woman as you can see being portrayed in Wild Style?
No, that's somebody else. That's Patty Astor. That's playing basically Patty Astor.
Oh, right, she's playing herself in that movie, right?
That's somebody else.
Okay.
That's the owner of and founder of the Fun Gallery, which is downtown. I also exhibited in that gallery as well. But no, it's two different people.
Right.
So as a young man at 16, I was already introduced into the art scene, and I was making exhibitions. And that brought me 2 years later in a group show in Brussels, the first group show of graffiti art in 1984 with Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Futura 2000, Crash Days, Lady Pink, myself.
Those are big names, man.
And that gallery invited me back in 85 to do my first solo show in Brussels. And when I got there was no graffiti.
85 you're talking about?
85, there was no graffiti in Brussels. There was a few like pictogram tags and figurines on walls and like dark places, but in the streets it was clean. So, you know, I got my tags, I got busy, I started hitting the city, and I realized that at that point, you know, as a young black African American, here I am in a very white conservative Belgium, representing basically hip hop culture and absorbing as much as I can around me. I went to Italy to visit a partner there, A1, who was there visiting, and that started for me this triad of New York, Brussels, and Milan. And for the next 5 years, that's the places where I was rotating through.
Right. Well, that's a nice introduction, and also where you all came from, and that is really amazing at such a young age. And the way you got your name, I like it because I like chess too. Now, I got this question because when I would read on the flyers and stuff, They start off. This is Kool Koor. He is old school, and he used to be the right hand of Rammellzee. Now, what's up with that? Where did that all fit in? Like, okay, Al Capone had a right hand, and people like that saw the right hand, but it didn't always turn out well for the right hands, right? So what's your take on that? Like, where did that fit in history? Where was it? Was it in the 16, when you were 16, 18, or before that?
I met Rammellzee in 1979.
Okay, so, yeah.
I met him before I did my first exhibition.
I understand. Yeah.
And when I met him, he had already written down his treatise, his whole philosophy, his whole math, his universe, his whole breakdown of the war on language. He had it scripted.
Wow.
At the age of 18. I think he was 17 or 18 then. And
you mean he put it like in a cipher or something like that?
In a document.
And it was
typed.
coded, encrypted. Oh no, typed with alphabet.
Legible.
All right.
Legible, but illegible because it was very complex. But he already knew what he was doing, and I gravitated to him because he was thinking outside of the box on a mathematical, metaphysical, galactic way. And him being of African American descent, African American and Italian descent, when you look at him, you think that he might be Latino. But in many ways, he was blacker than black.
Gotcha.
The Italian side, maybe in his choice of garments that he wore and things like that, he had his style. But at the same time, it's the mixture of his 5% Nation of Islam knowledge, his personal hunger for information about symbolism and religion that drove him to build what he built. And me being fascinated by everything that was galactic and otherworldly meant that we was going to connect.
Yeah.
Now, when I started in high school, I was still connected to architecture, so I studied architecture. And Rammellzee had a crew, and to be in his crew, you had to draft a letter that was capable of being built and that could fly, and that could shoot missiles. And your math had to be correct. Your math had to be correct.
All right. So, as a matter of fact, you all had to make a document, a sort of like an assignment or an essay, the way, just to get you into a course.
Into his crew.
And the proof should be that this, what you is writing, is like a missile. Okay. So, and it had to be in words.
It had to be a letter, a tank. A letter as a tank, armed to fight against language.
Wow.
A1 did his, he did an A. Me, I wanted B1, but I did a K because my name is Koor. But in the symbolism of a K, you have a B. So from a B, you can have an R. From an R, you could have a K. And then the final transition of the B is a 13. If you separate the vertical line and the two semi-ciphers, you get a 13. So in my artwork is BRK13 that repeated itself over and over again in my iconic message that I was sending out. And so I drafted there was no second draft. When I finished it, he was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Other cats was like trying, and he's like, your shit's off. No, go back to work.
Oh, for real.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a metaphysical letter, sort of thing.
It's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object that can be built.
Right.
And as he invented the science around it, he's the one that can yes or no whether you did it properly.
Yeah. Right.
So what did that mean?
You got the codex.
That meant that me being a member of TMK was a rather elite thing at that time, because in the structure of the graffiti scene, you had artists that were basically bombing. You had artists that were doing bubble letters or throw-ups on trains for being kings of lines as bombers. You had others that were being seen as kings of style, like Dondi, who was able to do masterpieces on very, very frequent level, like Lee, that did a lot of trains. There's a lot of other artists I can name, but a lot of those other graffiti artists were about perfecting wild style letters and characters and scenery. Our focus was on the importance of the letter, because when you go to school, you're taught how to put words together to make a sentence, sentences together to make a paragraph, and then chapters, and then books and things like that. Were you ever taught what a letter was?
Not like that.
We're putting these symbols together and accepting that what is being told to us is correct, when in fact it's not correct. Because Romance languages and a lot of languages that we use in various roots have been tricked. They've been transformed from their original form, the original sonic or phonetics, to have other sounds in other languages. So if you take a symbol and you use it in a different way, it's no longer that same symbol.
Right.
So we're speaking slanguage right now. We're not speaking language. Rammellzee was on that.
I got this. Another partner of me. He was into poetry, but what you now explain, he did the same type of stuff in poetry, just deciphering what the language was, and he just attacked the language continuously, because he tried to warn everybody in a sense, even my warning, you will misinterpret, he said, but no matter, he said, it is actually a code given to keep you in prison. And that prison that you are building is actually your only escape. So where that prison is being built now, you are manifesting it every time actually when you speak. Even when you think, you're now getting what you was taught, putting it now in your mind, while you should get rid of it and get your mind clear and not try to alter that what you're doing.
You can only take out a symbol with a symbol.
And now this is the interesting stuff. So he said, now I'm fighting actually in a chess game with 3 players. Right? So he started, we was talking about this, building a little bit on it. And if you want to take it away with the symbol, then first you have to go to the word symbol, like where did the letters come from, the first letters that was ever written. Then we went back and we saw, like, we found some source where they said, well, actually they are maps of the galaxy, like the way particular stars were. If you would drew them, then you could see that it's a map of a star that was just one letter, right? Or one symbol. Now, imagine that you will have the whole culture of that civilization living over there just in one symbol. So we went back to the Superman stuff on the chest. Like when you see the movie Superman, you see all of these other super people, they got different symbols on their chest, so they represent also something. So this science, somebody already knows about this, right? So now when you want to take away the symbol with the symbol, it doesn't matter where you want to go, you always get caught up by the same people who already know this. They're going to block you. So
but he who controls the language controls the world, because everything in the origin of communication was based on those who have right to privilege or the accessibility to express themselves and understand and be able to write.
I follow. But this is the point. Listen, when you got this now, that everywhere you is blocked, right? And I'm not mean they block you and say stop, but when you want to pick up the source, you're still going to end up in the language which is controlled by the same people, right? Now, when that's the case, you come to a point where you have to say, like, hey, actually we have a choice now. We say, look, nothing we're going to do, we're going to start off scratch. Or what hip-hop did in the language is they took a word and they made it their own. A word like nigger, for instance, right? They made it their own word. I mean, maybe people shouldn't say it, people, whatever, but it proves that there was a consciousness going on, like, hey, so now the thoughts and the phonetics around that word was changing. So phonetically, the words were changing by taking away the ER, making an A in the end, stuff like that. And so you can see that the words that the people write, like their own name, they changed it for themselves, but we're still using the letter and the symbols of the ones that is trying to keep your mind in that two-dimensional frame. Actually, it's a two-dimensional thing going on now. While they said a word has at least many sides, right? You not only got sides of the word, it is in space, right? So where do you see, like, we take away the symbol with a symbol? Are you now saying, like, in order to fight fire, you need fire? Or how must I see it?
I'm trying to just express that language as we're speaking it is not language. So
it's language.
So all bets are off.
All right.
So we could do whatever we want with these letters, but you could only do whatever you want with these letters if you know how to take them out. Otherwise, you're just expressing yourself in the same non-existent form of communication. We still use it because 1% of the planet still doesn't even understand what I'm talking about now, because they think it's bullshit or they think it's crazy. But for those that do understand a little bit of it, it's an interesting place to be, trying to express yourself within a culture which is based on symbols. And that forced us to be in a different place as young adults trying to make moves inside of this culture, because a lot of people in the art world were not ready for that because it was too complex. And I mean, not even talking about the race thing, or race is not the right word because we're all the same race. It's not the ethnic thing. It's not the color of the skin thing. It's something else. So we had to firstly establish ourselves from an artistic level, and at the same time bring that information. The difference is Rammellzee, he was bringing the information and letting the art do its thing afterwards. So in the beginning, a lot of people thought he was great. A lot of people thought he was a madman. Now the brother's no longer with us. Now everybody's calling him a genius. And I said just the same thing with my brother Joe Conzo a few minutes ago. One of the hardest things to do is to stay alive. History will take care of itself. You just have to keep yourself healthy so that you can be here to continue to defend your case.
Right. That's nicely said, man. That's very nicely said. So that brings me on to the next question. It might be out of bounds totally, but the way we talked about, like, you got like a culture, and you said like it has nothing to do with race, ethnicity. Yeah, to a certain degree it is, but where this all came from initially was also like you fight against something that was built by the same people who did look at those aspects like race and ethnicity, right? So if we would check that or leave that out, it would in this earthly thing, not in a worldly thing, but in an earthly thing, it would be kind of naive to let it out also for ourselves to take that part out of the equation for whatever we is doing, right? So we are now today over here at Urban Matters, right? And I spoke about this earlier, like at the same time we got all of these great artists coming up over here, you know, doing for the love or whatever reasons they got to do it, you know, and bringing people together. At the same time, we are in a building, and I know for a fact that these organizations, they work together with organizations that actually is holding down the people who used to be the audience for the same community, for whom these performers, artists are coming to perform now. They even came from out of that community, right? And the organizations now is holding those communities to the back in a certain way, and we cannot see it. The people, the artists that come from America do not know what is going on in the Netherlands or in Belgium for that sake. But when we living over here, you know, we are already immune to it. We already know how to move through all of that. Sometimes, I mean, I slipped up by even thinking like I could go as a soloist and just say what I had to say to them. But how does that all fit now with where it is at today? Like, where do we stand in? Where do artists stand in? Where do they fit into that in order to bring that type of info to the people? Like, is it that?
I think there's a term that everybody uses. It's called being woke, or being awake, or being enlightened, or being of knowledge. Not everybody has that calling. There's a lot of musicians, there's a lot of people that are in the public's eye that they're there for many reasons. But I always say, you know, we're brought into this world to remind somebody of something. You know, we met a few years ago and we had our conversations, and maybe our reason for coming together was not just to talk, it was just to maybe something I said to you helped you to remember something that you needed to do, and something you said to me helped me to remember something that I forgot that I needed to do. It's about touching the next person and helping them to be in a position or a mindset to know that it's their moral obligation to help somebody else to move on and to help somebody else. Because if you're not in the process of passing on that you have accumulated during your life, then, you know, you basically did not understand what the meaning of life is. It's not about having the most toys and then putting them in your grave with you. It's about sharing whatever you learn. Like your mother or your uncle or your aunt or your father who maybe cooked a specific dish that their grandmother used to cook when they were little that they liked. They pass that on to you, and you pass that on to somebody. It may not be someone in your family, but all of these little gems that you pass on is about expanding an awareness of something that's, again, bigger than us, something that is more important than us.
And that cannot be written down for that sake.
Yeah, it's something that has to be transmitted. Yeah. And, you know, our ancestors had the practice of oral transmission of history.
That's what I'm saying.
And today, it's the person who writes the book that has the power. And we're coming back to the same thing. You're using these same symbols and these same words to tell me what I'm supposed to be understanding as fact.
Yeah, the same book's telling us to be free, while that is the trap in itself.
Do you accept it or do you not accept it? When I was 16, I was not thinking like that. But when I got older and I started to travel the world and meet a lot of people, I know that it's bigger than me. So for me, it was mandatory to reach out and do leadership development lectures and talks and give back to the community and to share my knowledge, because everything that I accomplished and everything that I gained is because of somebody else. Everything is because of somebody else. So I can't just hold it as it's mine. It's not mine. It's mine for a minute, but then I gotta give it to somebody else. You know? When I was young, I loved basketball. I played every day. Now my knees are destroyed. I can't play no more. I pass it on to the next man.
Yo,
you know what I'm saying?
I ain't going to talk about that right now. That's beautiful, man. I don't know, man. You enlightened us with so much, and I can see what you're talking about. You talk about this cultural integrity and talking about the integrity, so-called quote-unquote responsibility a human should have, when you ask me. Otherwise, how can you otherwise be a human for that sake? Well, okay, that goes a little bit far-fetched for some. The same, you know, because you want to make a claim, not you specific, but you know, when you're human, you want to make, I am human. What makes you different from any other object, so to say, or organism, or tree, or, you know. So, with that said, right, I have to get back to the point. I mean, so now we are over here. Like, you touch me, I touch me. You know, as something that, you know, sparkles something with you, maybe a memory, or maybe a new thought, or maybe something that you actually, not really new things, but, you know, like we building, just by being in each other's presence, for saying little things, maybe just
That should be a part of the program.
there you go. Just by our behavior itself, like the way I would run and get something at the Jumbo and buy something, or Lidl, or Albertine. I have to mention three, I guess. And you know, just being with people for you know, whatever. So you say that should be even more important, even when we know we are in the corridors of Babylon.
I feel that if you are
with our own culture, with our own culture,
this building to enlighten people of the community, whoever it is that understood and read a poster and came, you're having other people coming from another culture here to represent their culture from 35 years ago, 25 years ago. I think that their voice is something that should be heard on a community level, not to just those that come here. So if I was a part of the organization of any event, I think that round table or a lecture or a meet and greet should take place.
Absolutely.
Where you can go into the community, go to a off-site center,
exactly.
Speak to the youth who don't have access to a 25-year-old ticket. To understand how this black person or this Afro-Asian person or this person from another side of the planet came over here because of something that they liked to do when they were a little kid just like you.
But ain't that called like modern day colonization with our own invention type of thing?
I find that, you know, everything you can always say when it's a step forward is a beautiful thing. There's always an opportunity to take it a next step. But yeah, for me, an important aspect of being a member of this hip hop culture is about transmission of information and transmission of knowledge.
Yeah, we spoke about it 2 years ago. We had this good conversation. Listen.
So if you have a place for me to come, I'll come.
Yeah,
and
dope.
I'll talk to the youth.
Oh, that is so dope for saying. That's dope, man.
With pleasure.
Yeah, man. We're gonna look into that because I'm all for that. I don't understand. Well, but that's for off-camera stuff. But you know. Yeah, man. You got something to say, but let's get back. Yeah, true. That is, man. So this is.
I can say one thing.
All right.
To all that may be listening, the universal rule number one is be original. But if you can't be original, at least give credit to the author. Right.